Ever wonder what happens to milk before it reaches your fridge?
Yeah.
We're taking a deep dive into the world of dairy processing operators with some help from RoleCatcher.com.
Sounds refreshing.
Definitely more intriguing than you might think. These are the folks behind the scenes making sure the dairy aisle is fully stocked.
It's not as simple as just pouring milk into cartons, is it?
Not at all. The guide even uses the phrase, bringing your passion for dairy to life. What does a dairy processing operator actually do all day?
They're using their knowledge and skills to transform raw milk into all those dairy products we love.
We're talking cheese, yogurt, ice cream, the works. This sounds like a very hands-on career path.
It really is. And they work with some serious machinery, too.
The guide mentions something called continuous flow systems and VAT-type equipment. Sounds intense.
It is. Continuous flow systems handle huge quantities of milk. And VAT-type equipment. Think of them as giant specialized tanks.
So they need a solid understanding of the equipment and how it all works.
Absolutely. And it's not just about operating the equipment. It's about understanding the processes happening inside those giant tanks, like culturing yogurt or making cheese.
So like a culinary chemist, but for dairy.
Exactly. They need to make sure each batch meets precise standards. Troubleshooting is a big part of the job, too.
What do you mean?
Well, take yogurt production, for example. Let's say a batch isn't culturing correctly. A dairy processing operator would need to figure out why.
Could be any number of factors, right?
Right. Could be the temperature, the bacterial cultures, any number of things. It's like being a dairy detective.
Speaking of which, the guide really emphasizes hygiene. I imagine with food production, especially dairy, cleanliness is critical.
Oh, absolutely. Food safety is paramount.
These operators are really on the front lines there.
They have to maintain a sanitary environment and follow strict regulations every step of the way. Do you know even a small lapse in hygiene can ruin an entire batch of cheese?
Wow, talk about high stakes. So we're talking specialized equipment, a good grasp of science, and an unwavering commitment to hygiene. What else can you tell us about what it takes to succeed in this field? We've talked about the machinery, the science, even being a dairy detective. But what about some of those other skills someone would need? What about the human element?
Wow, well, you know how the guide emphasizes attention to detail.
Right, right. A dairy processing operator has to be on top of their game.
Exactly. Those instructions, methods, and formulas we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Following those to the letter, that's what makes all the difference.
Between a good batch and a not-so-good batch.
Between a perfectly aged cheddar and, well, let's just say a cheese catastrophe.
Okay, so no pressure. But seriously, what could go wrong? Give me an example.
Okay, imagine cheese making. The flavor and texture of the cheese. A lot of that comes down to the bacteria cultures used.
I never really thought about it like that.
Even a tiny error in the amount of culture added can totally change the final product.
So these operators are like, what'd you call them earlier?
Dairy detectives.
Right, right. And culinary chemists.
Yeah.
Carefully orchestrating everything. So you've mastered the art of cheese making. What's next? Where can this career take you?
Well, as you get more experience, the guide says you could move into supervisory roles.
Working your way up.
Right. Maybe even manage a whole team of operators one day. Or you could specialize. Become a master cheesemaker, a yogurt aficionado, all things curd.
Now that's what I call delicious career progression. The guy also mentions a stable job outlook for dairy processing operators. Why do you think that is?
Well, for one thing, the global population keeps growing. More people means a greater demand for food, including dairy products.
Makes sense.
And technology in the industry is always advancing. They'll need skilled operators to keep up with all that sophisticated equipment.
So job security is looking pretty good. It definitely seems like a career with a future. So we've learned that dairy processing operators play a really vital role. They're the ones who bring those dairy products from farm to our fridges.
They're the ones making sure your cheese is perfectly aged and your yogurt is perfectly cultured.
And that our ice cream is perfectly smooth. They really are the unsung heroes of the dairy aisle. But all this talk about cheese and yogurt, it's got me thinking. We've been focusing on traditional dairy, but what about plant-based alternatives?
Oh, you mean like oat milk and almond milk and all that?
Exactly. Could a dairy processing operator, could they also work with those kinds of products?
That's a good question. I mean, the source material might be different, but when you think about it, a lot of those processing principles are the same. You'd still need all that specialized equipment and strict hygiene standards, and that keen eye for quality control.
So their expertise could transfer over.
It could. It really makes you think about how the industry might evolve and how these operators might adapt their skills to a whole new range of products.
That's definitely something to ponder. So there you have it, a glimpse behind the curtain into the world of dairy processing operators. It's a career path that's more than meets the eye.
A fascinating blend of science, technology, and a little bit of artistry.
All working together to bring those dairy delights to our tables.